What's up, patrons? Welcome to this week's bonus audio. I forgot how I entered this immediately.
Every time. Every other time.
This is less formal than the main show. We don't have a set blah 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 blah. Here's the things I say real fast.
Hey, what's up? Listeners?
I'm Justin.
I'm Dylan.
We're two of a kind.
Do you get the does your TikTok show you the Tim Heidecker show? I don't even know what the show is called. I don't even know if it's a show. I only see the clips on TikTok, but they're the film critics.
Yeah, it's
I don't know the other dude's name because it's not
Cinema on Cinema. Yeah, that was called or something like that. That guy's name's Turkington or something like that. He's the guy in Ant-Man who works at Baskin Robbins that fires Paul Rudd at the beginning of the movie.
Which on Cinema, yeah.
Yeah. I know what you're talking about
with that show.
What? Yeah, it took me forever to figure it out too.
Is it still on something?
Is it on Twitch? Is it on YouTube? Is it a live stream only type show? Because I don't think it's a podcast.
Web series and podcast. But yeah, it's Greg Turkington's the other dude.
And they're kind of characters too.
Yeah. They're playing characters. Those are I don't know how they pull off that level of awkwardness and never break. I mean, I guess we don't see that, the cuts.
Yeah, we're seeing the TikTok spliced cuts out,
But
yeah. It's one of those things where it's who watches this? How do people watch this? Why do they watch it?
Well, I see them a lot. Yeah.
If it was a podcast, I feel like I would have found them a long time ago and probably listened. But I don't know. I don't think it's a normal podcast. It's not in any of the podcasting apps.
Yeah. And I don't know if I could watch it in long form because I see the clips on TikTok and I'm sometimes they'll make me laugh. Most of the time I just watch the whole thing and I don't really laugh. I really don't react to it, but I just I really enjoy watching it because I'm how are they doing this? How do they write this? How do they come up with these lines and this delivery? Even if it's not that funny, I just enjoy watching them do it.
Yeah. I think it's just improv skills.
Yeah. But yeah, long form, I don't know that I could watch more than a TikTok's length. I will watch a segment where they talk about one movie. But yeah, a whole episode, 30 minutes, 20 minutes. How long are they?
Yeah, I don't know. I will say Matt McCarthy's VHS a day this year, he's hit his stride. He's nailing all of these now. It's amazing how, because he's already been doing it for such a long time anyway, but
I could not have predicted that Macarena episode one being so good. I was a dance instruction tape. How funny is that really going to be? It's one of the best things he's done.
It's so good. Yeah, very funny. If you can follow him on Instagram if you don't have a TikTok, because I know not everybody has TikToks. Some people are very resistant to the idea of them. He's on Instagram too. Matt McCarthy Redhead, I think is the handle. But
he's on he does We Watch Wrestling.
Yep, We Watch Wrestling podcast. He is also an actor who's been in hundreds of commercials that you've seen over the years, and he's been in movies. He's in The Other Guys. He was on an episode of Brooklyn Nine-Nine. Was the most recent? It was a satellite.
There was a.
Was it what was that? It was a commercial where he's him and another guy are delivery guys or cable guys or something like that. Last year, the year before, you recognize him. You'd be that guy, the guy with red hair and a red beard. Yeah, that guy. I've seen him and stuff. But yeah, very funny. Stand-up comedian too. I don't know how we got on that, but
yeah. Well, we have more to talk about on this movie than maybe we realize, so we should probably get into what we're doing.
We're not really stalling because there's a lot to talk about here, but I don't know, maybe we're just wanting to riff. But yeah, we are doing a Masterpunk theater, as you know, because you've seen the title of this podcast. Do you think anybody just downloads it blind and doesn't read anything and they're just I'm just gonna listen no matter what? Because I kind of do that. Like, I don't read episode bios if it's a show I listen to regularly, especially if I'm a patron. Maybe if it's like a show that has guests, I'll read the bio to see like who's on the episode. But usually I just like press play, listen to the whole thing. So I don't know. I don't know how our listeners partake. But yes, Masterpunk Theater. We are covering the 2001 film Ghost World. And we went with this film because it was released in 2001, which corresponds with our album we're going to be talking about next week on the podcast. So, our thing with these is we try and pick movies that kind of have music bents to them. Like, either they're like tied to punk music in some way, or they like feature like punk and indie music pretty prominently. And we thought this was one of those movies, and it's kind of a music movie.
Yeah.
It's just not punk. There's a punk song in it, but it's not the kind of soundtrack I thought it was going to have.
No.
Despite me having seen this movie before, I had no memory of it.
Yeah, you completely lost this one. You're like, yeah, that's a punk movie, right?
And I'm like,
a leather jacket.
Yeah. I'm literally tricked by the poster and like the one scene in the movie, you know. So
despite it not being truly a punk movie, it does fit in the world of that punk would fit in the 90s, I think, in terms of like alternative cultures and indie culture, and based on the comic books, the independent comics, which I feel like has a fair overlap with punk culture, subculture.
Yeah, it's definitely very counterculture. The main characters are like outcast type people. You would think punk music would be a bigger part of them just in general, just because of like when it's set and like their attitudes in general. You'd think they would be big into punk, but not really. But they definitely fit that like outsider mold. And really, this is not the kind of movie, we don't get this kind of movie anymore.
No, that was something I was thinking really through the whole movie. It's one of the things I really enjoyed about the movie is that it's a kind of movie we don't get anymore. I'm trying to think of what to really compare it to. As much as it's not a punk movie, it does feel a lot like SLC Punk.
Yeah, it's definitely like a Gen X post independent film style movie. So like based off of the directing approach and styles and what marketing learned from movies like Slackers and Clerks. You know, like not exactly the same like aesthetics and sense of humors, but more of just like the independent spirit of those movies.
The overall tone is very like Gen X sarcastic.
Malaise.
Deadpan, Malay. Yeah, very like, what's the point? You know, kind of kind of that Big Lebowski sense of nihilism and
very Daria.
Yeah. Extremely Daria sensibility.
Yeah, we don't really have this kind of movie anymore. Maybe because these kind of teens don't exist anymore. Like they're not the same kind of teens anymore. And I guess that's what a lot of these movies are kind of modeled off of.
Yeah, we don't. This was the last era of like pre-internet teen culture. So,
and like specifically the counterculture. Yeah, because like the more like mainstream teen films from this time period would have been more like, I don't know, what would have, they're horror movies, weren't they? Like Can't Hardly Wait, I guess would be one. I Know What You Did Last Summer, like that kind of
anything with Freddie Prinze Jr.
Yeah. Bring It On, maybe. Like those would be the more like mainstream versions, and this is for like the weird kid who like thrift shops and likes records.
There's a big generational divide between this kind of movie and what you would get now from like a subculture counterculture teen movie, is that like the sense of isolation is not as strong now because you can go online and find people that are into the weird shit that you're into. Whereas like, as you see in this movie, it's like a weird 18-year-old girl and a 40-something-year-old, like that's that's who has this niche interest in this town.
Yeah, so it's released 2001. It is a black comedy film co-written and directed by Terry Zwigoff. Terry Zwigoff is known for directing the Crumb film, as well as later directing Bad Santa and
Weird.
Art School Confidential.
He
is another Daniel Close comic turned film, which is what this is.
Yeah, he's definitely super into underground comics, heavily involved. He did some editing on some old stuff, and he played in Robert Crumb's band, the Cheap Suit Serenaders, which they make a joke. There's a little Easter egg joke in the movie about that.
And Daniel Close, he is the graphic novelist, cartoonist. I think 8-Ball is like his original breakout stuff, which was like his anthology comic series, which is where Ghost World actually came from. It was in 8-Ball, and then it was eventually published on its own. He did other stuff like David Boring. When you look at like 90s independent comics, like this is like one of the main guys that you would really think of. Also, the designer for the OK Soda cans.
Yeah.
God, I wish they'd bring that back.
Has Zwigoff done? He did something in 2017, so he disappeared from filmmaking, and I think I might know a little bit of why. In 2009, Zwigoff signed a petition in support of Roman Polanski, calling for his release after he was arrested in Switzerland for the 1977 charges. Polanski apologist. Yikes.
Yeah, but he like won the Academy Award that year too, I think, or whatever.
Yeah.
While he wasn't allowed to come to the country, so like him being a Polanski supporter is not that weird based on when it happened, unfortunately.
Yeah, because the industry was.
Yeah.
In general. Yeah.
Yeah. Not a huge output though. Like, and he never really struck me as someone who would make a huge output anyway, you know.
Yeah.
So the movie, it's focused on two teenagers, Enid, played by Thora Birch, and Rebecca, played by Scarlett Johansson, one of the earliest Scarlett Johansson films. Her acting has not changed in 20 years.
No, it has not. She found that style.
Oh yeah, I'm sure like Sofia Coppola, like putting her in that movie and making her a gigantic star, she was like, well, this is just how I have to act in everything going forward now, right?
Yeah.
It got me awards. So
yeah.
My favorite Asian actress.
Don't emote.
When she's defending her, like, I can play anything. I can play any race. I could play a tree. I was like, well, we have actual Asian actors.
Yeah.
And we don't have sentient trees. So unless you're trying to be an Ent in Lord of the Rings, I don't think you got much competition. Or that tree in Pocahontas, the tree lady. But they take so the friendship takes a rift in their friendship due to an interest in an older man named Seymour, played by Steve Buscemi, who Enid becomes determined to help in his romantic life. And there's more to it, obviously. We'll get into that stuff as it happens, but
that's the premise.
That's the premise of the film. So you've never seen it before, right?
No.
So I had seen it. Like, it's been more than a decade. I was really trying to remember when I saw it. My guess is it would have been in like the 2000s, like mid 2000. I probably saw it in like 05, 06, something around that time period. And there was always a part of me that was like, I didn't remember much about the movie. Like, I watched it, but I didn't remember shit about it.
And fall asleep.
I don't think I did, because I wasn't really like falling asleep in movies. Like, I don't really fall asleep in movies now, but unless I'm at home. But no, I can't. I don't know. I don't know what it is about this movie that just never stuck with me. Because I remembered as it was happening, like every scene was familiar to me, but it just like never really like stuck in my brain, which is weird because like this is the exact type of movie that I should have been like obsessed with. Because like the movies I saw during this time period would have been High Fidelity, American Splendor, SLC Punk, like all these movies that became like my favorite movies for like a good 5 to 6 years. Some of them still my favorite movies. SLC Punk is something I've not seen in a very long time, and I have a feeling didn't age as well. But High Fidelity and American Splendor are still very much my top 2 films.
I don't think SLC Punk. What I've seen from SLC Punk in recent years, I don't think it's aged any worse than this movie did.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know that it's necessarily the content of that movie, but more of just like I don't connect to it the same way I would have at that age.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. So, and I was really like I was like, I remember watching it. I remember thinking I liked it, but clearly I just didn't. I must not have really liked it as much as I thought I did. And it was like, yeah, it was strange. And I now know why I think this movie didn't stick with me, which we can get into later. But what were your overall thoughts on this movie? Good, bad, indifferent?
My overall probably slightly more positive than indifferent. Very close to the middle, but like this is a movie that I can very easily break down into what I liked and what I didn't like about it, and like in the general structure and flow of the movie, I would say first half of the movie I was struggling to enjoy it, and the second half I enjoyed it much more. So I think it mostly is like a structural pacing issue with the movie that is like the biggest problem with it. And like it's not a movie I'm motivated to come back to anytime soon. It's probably not a movie that I would want to watch, that I would really even choose to watch again. But I would watch it if I was pressed to watch it. You know, like if my wife wanted to watch it, I'd be like, all right, well, you've never seen it, but I have. You know, I could sit and watch it again, and probably enjoy it more the second time. So there's that, I guess I would say. But there were definitely multiple points throughout the movie where I was like, I'm not enjoying this. Like I literally said it out loud to myself. I was just like, I don't like this movie.
It's weird because it's one of those movies where I'm like, I think it's a good movie. I think it's technically a good movie. It's interesting. It's unique. It's generally viewed as critically as pretty favorable too. Like people like this movie. They think of it positively. But I think what my biggest like takeaway from the movie is it's good, but I don't really like it in a way that you're like, it's not even that I don't like it. It's that I think I just don't like the main character.
Yeah. No, yeah. And that's a pretty big issue with the movie. And it's like the first half of the movie is really focused on the two girls and how awful they are.
Yeah. They suck so much. Just they are the peak of the like sarcastic kind of outsider mean girls, you know?
Yeah.
Like the kind of girls that just like they're just rude.
Yeah.
and they're like, we're outsiders, so that means that gives us the right to be assholes to everyone. But whereas no one is doing anything to actually earn their ire. They're just like too nice or too chipper or too upbeat.
They just exist and have whatever like mainstream cultural interests. Like they really aren't, which I do think there's a deliberate choice, probably true to the comics, just in the overall story, that they make a point of not showing them being bullied.
Yeah.
Like they're outsiders, but they're outsiders by choice. And I think that's very important to their characters. So I don't like fault the movie for that. I think it is a deliberate choice, but it is just like so hard to root for them. It's so hard to get invested into their story because they're so like they're choosing to be shitty to everyone. Like they can't just accept that other people like other things, that they like their own weird little things and just be that, which I do think that plays into the rift that develops between the two main characters because I can't remember her name, Scarlett Johansson's character, like she gets a job and she wants to move into the apartment, and like she's honestly like pretty self-confident, even though she's like kind of, you know, she's just as shitty. She's like pretty secure in her identity and who she is and chooses to be, and like stays pretty true to that. Whereas Thora Birch Enid, like her whole story arc is that she's been jumping from this interest to this interest to this interest. She has no real deep connection to anything. She's like trying on different hats. Like they have the scene where she's selling it's like, this is from your little old lady phase.
Yeah.
And she buys that mask and wears it in one scene. And like she's just someone who's literally trying on different hats. She tries on the Punk costume for one scene and then gets told that Punk's dead.
Yeah. The only like antagonistic relationships they actually do have is with like the other kind of weirdo outsider guys, like the guy who like sells her those like tapes, bootleg tapes, I guess, import tapes, and then like I guess it's a comic book store that they're in. Yeah. Like those are the people that are like probably as weird as them. Really, they parallel very much the group of friends that Stanley has.
Yeah.
Stanley? Is that his name? Buscemi's character. Seymour's friend group. It's like they're the older version of that group of guys in the comic shop.
Weird outsiders who are mostly antagonistic to each other.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it's Scarlett Johansson's trying to grow up, but Enid just kind of wants to like stay in her little like I want to be weird. I want to keep making fun of random people. I want to, do the things that we used to do all the time. Whereas she's like, I got to get a job. I'm trying to get us an apartment. Like she clearly wants to like grow up and like get on with her life. And I think Enid is more stuck in the like,
well, yeah,
she just feels directionless. Like she doesn't know what she wants to be or do.
Yeah.
She wants to stay the way she is, but it's not tenable. Like you can't just stay and snark and follow people all around. Like that's a thing that they do multiple times in the movie. Like they just like
stalk people.
Let's follow them. And it's just like, no, don't do that. It's the kind of thing that like an edgy teenager does.
Yeah. Which they do a really good job of making them realistic, shitty teenagers.
Oh yeah, I was watching this and I was like, this is the most realistic group of shitty teenagers I've ever seen. This is real. These are very lived in, realistic type characters. Like, very down to earth. It's the kind of thing where like Enid's like shitty to everyone she encounters in this movie.
Yeah.
She gets a job at a movie theater and like cannot help herself.
Yeah.
In just defying everything that the manager who's training her is trying to do. And he's just like, it's the job, like, why are you doing this? This is the job. She gets fired on her first day,
Yeah. That's the difference. One of the big differences between her and Scarlett Johansson is like Scarlett Johansson's character can accept that she has to behave a certain way in order to like leave work and go be herself. Mm-hmm. She's like, I can turn off myself for the 4, 5, 6, 8 hours that I'm at work, and then I can leave and I can go do my own things with my life. Like,
let's get where do you want to go?
Is your first note the same as my first note?
My first note is hard R in the first 5 minutes of this movie. Yeah, that word pops up a couple times too.
It's the time period. I understand that. It's like I'm not trying to judge it by today's.
It is. It's also she is abrasive. Like she's definitely abrasive because there are times where she like says things to Steve Buscemi and he's like, Jesus Christ. Like he reacts very like, whoa, cool it. That kind of reaction like many times. So like she's meant to be more abrasive than the average person. Usually, at least in the way that like people talk to each other, But yeah, she definitely drops a hard R. She calls some people gay a couple times. There's some racism.
Yeah, the comic book. I mean, she's Jewish, or Enid is Jewish. And the guy from the comic book store like definitely says some racist, anti-Semitic
jokes. Yeah,
jokes and stereotypes and
which
that's an interesting like race is like they deal with racism and kind of dabble in racism like in trying to make commentary on it in a way that I ultimately isn't really that successful.
Yeah.
But it's not a completely dishonest representation of how people use racism to be edgy and put a lampshade on it and call it a commentary. We can. I don't know. Maybe we can just talk about this here because we're on that note.
Yeah. So I guess to set up the idea, Enid can't graduate until she takes this remedial art class. Did you recognize the art teacher?
Yes.
From the Drew Carey show.
Drew Carey show.
She was Drew's like girlfriend for like, was it multiple episodes? She's the vegetarian, right?
Yeah, I think so.
So I think it's just the one episode.
Like maybe 1 or 2 episodes.
Yeah.
She's been in a lot of stuff.
Yeah, she's been in a ton of stuff.
Very recognizable actor.
She's the art teacher. She's this like, she's kind of a parody of the type of art teacher that, you know, she's playing in there. Like all art is meant to serve a purpose and to make some sort of commentary, and then and even makes comments towards Enid's character and one of the other guys in the class, you know, like talking about their art as cartoons and how they're light entertainment and they're not, you know, meant to be taken seriously, which is 100% a commentary by Daniel Close, I'm sure, being like as what is it? How's the line from Harvey Pekar? Comics is serious stuff or something like that.
Yeah.
Like comics can be anything is the approach, and most people don't have that view on comic books.
Yeah. There's definitely some very comic book artist, underground artist poking fun at like the fine art world, and which is, you know, there's valid criticism to be made about fine art world, and the overemphasis and requirement and expectation for people to put political and social commentary into everything, and he doesn't really actually say much of anything.
Yeah. So she's in this art class. She's not doing very well for the most part, because I don't think the teacher just gets it. And there's a point in the movie where she's hanging out with Seymour in his apartment. He has a room full of like pulp artwork and like vintage art all over the place. And in the corner, he's got some posters, and she goes through it and she finds like this racist caricature on one picture. And she's like, "What is this?" And he's like, "Are you a Klansman?" He's like, "Yes, I'm a Klansman." You know, like, and this is real. This was a real thing. It was a chain of fried chicken restaurants that had a very racist name and racist mascot logo. And in the film, this chain changed their name to Cook's Chicken, and the real life chain stopped existing.
Yeah.
But it became Cook's Kitchen, and he works for Cook's Kitchen as like a VP of sales or something like that.
He's
marketing.
He's like some kind of manager of marketing.
Mm-hmm. He has an office job for this chicken chain, and he like took it from work. He said he borrowed it a few years ago, and then he just like wound up keeping it.
Yeah.
And he's telling Enid like basically like, look, this famous chain has a really dark origin story that's very racist, and they've whitewashed over it, and it's basically like
pretend like it never happened. Yeah,
pretend like it never happened. And he's obviously interested in it from a like, this is fucked up, we shouldn't forget this kind of thing approach.
Well, yeah, it definitely fits within his aesthetic of just being interested in old things just because they're like, they have that conversation where she's like, "Do you think things are better?" Then he's like, "No, obviously things are better now." Like, but
yeah,
but people were like overtly racist and didn't hide it.
Yeah. So she borrows that and then takes it to school and submits it as like one of her pieces, and like use the excuse that it's like a found piece because one of the other students who was doing all the like the classic stereotypical mixed media found women's social issue commentary, like, oh, she's got like a bunch of like coat hangers, like all wire coat hangers to represent the woman's right to choose, and then like the tampon in a teacup, which I don't know what, I guess it's a vague like feminine commentary, societal. So she's trying to use this piece as like a way to kind of tap into that like greater commentary, and I think it's kind of a half-baked concept from her. Like, she's just kind of like, it's to show that things were racist and we just whitewash over. Like, she kind of gets it.
So the thing is, like, she makes a genuinely valid commentary, which she doesn't really formulate herself. She uses a piece of found media that she doesn't transform in any way at all. So she's just taking a historical object, making a commentary on it, and presenting it as a work of art. So I really think it fails as a work of art, and I think it also fails as a commentary in the way that it's just like, well, it's really just a museum piece, isn't it? You know, like this fits in like a historical museum, not an art gallery. Like it's not. So, and she's like, also, it's pretty obvious, I mean, from our perspective, it's pretty obvious that she's just doing this to pass the class.
Yeah.
She's like, oh, I know what works. Social commentary. Okay, this is an easy way to do it. And for her, it does seem like the primary interest for her is not only like why she chooses this to do that, because she could have very easily done something else, but she chooses this to do it because it's so shocking. And she gets a thrill out of that.
Yeah.
Edginess. And like she really waffles when she's put under the spotlight about like, this is really disturbing. This is like, why did you choose this? And she's kind of like, she doesn't have like a really solid, firm answer. She just quickly like repeats what the conversation that she had with Seymour about it.
And so it's,
and
the
then
movie
she kind of
really
forgets about it.
The movie does a really good job of like being like, this is an 18-year-old. This is how an 18-year-old thinks, and this is how an 18-year-old would try and do that. Like they nailed it. They nail it. It's not, she's not like this precocious, like super advanced, you know, like, well, you know, super hyper aware teen. Like she knows it's wrong in some way, but she wants the shock value. Plus she wants to pass the class and can't really defend it. And then the teacher is just up her own butt enough to be able to not be like, this shouldn't go into this this art display that I'm putting on with all my students. You know, like you can appreciate what she was trying to go for without being like, this is for public consumption now. And it's like, it goes badly and possibly winds up causing Seymour his job. That's left kind of vague, but you get the impression that, because he said the company was, you know, he said they don't like that kind of thing being out there in the public, you know, like he was reluctant to let her take it in the first place. And it's implied that he maybe lost his, he at least got in trouble, may have lost his job. But
it gets in the newspaper and his boss pulls him into the office. Is like, what do you know about this? And they cut from there.
Yeah.
I think you're supposed to infer from it that he probably loses his job.
Yeah. So we've kind of barely touched on Seymour as a character. He comes into the movie because Enid and Rebecca, I think is her name, they see a classified, and apparently their thing is they go through the classifieds and then just crank call them. That's pretty much how they do them. They find a classified where Seymour has pasted, like he said that, you know, I helped you find your contact. We met at the airport. You know, I thought there was a connection, you know, misconnections, you know, type classified. Yeah. And so they call him and leave him a message and then set up a date at this like diner. And then they go to the diner and like they watch because they want to see the guy and see, you know, what he looks like and everything like that. And they sit long enough where they're like, this is awful. Like they feel there's a level of guilt that they're feeling, that they're like, this is terrible. Like I feel bad. This isn't funny, you know, like it's just sad.
This was a bad idea.
And then they're like, let's follow him. And then, so they follow him back to his apartment.
Yeah. They wind up figuring out where he lives. They then he's like having a sale. I guess he like him and his roommate like regularly have a sale in their like garage where they sell their vintage stuff. And so they approach him. They like they want to try and find out more about him. Enid ends up like talking to him about records, Seymour's records. And he's like, he just keeps talking about like old 78s and stuff. And like, he's like, well, I don't have the kind of world music, you know, stuff that you're interested in, but I've got this old blues stuff, which is where they throw in the Arcrum, old timey band record, and make that little joke. He's like, that was not very good. And he's like, but here, and he gives Enid, or sells Enid, a compilation of like really rare old blues recordings, old blues and ragtime recordings, I guess. She ends up getting really obsessed with one of the songs on that compilation. She goes back to talk to him and like, you have more of these? And they kind of just like the relationship kind of spins out from there of her being like, give me more weird old shit. Like,
Yeah.
and he's like only into weird old shit.
And it's an interesting relationship. They do a really good job of really kind of keeping Seymour as a good guy. Like they never once make it seem like he's a creep.
Yeah.
Like they never imply that he's a creep. He thinks it's weird too. Like you could tell he thinks it's odd that she's hanging out with him so much, and like because she's so young, and it's one of those kind of like reluctant friendships where like Enid basically is like forcing this friendship upon him.
Yeah.
And so he's just kind of like goes along with it, and like he is appreciating that someone is appreciating his like weirdness and like how he is into old stuff, and it's not easy to find other people who are into that kind of stuff. And she tells him all the time like that he's great, and like people, you know, it's crazy that nobody wants to go out with you and that kind of stuff. But he's like, yeah, but it's weird. Like he's like, that's why I have a hard time getting a date, because I'm picky and I don't like a lot of the things that everybody else likes, and I like my weird stuff, you know?
Yeah.
And so I think she is drawn to him because it's like, that is the version, like that's who she is. She's the weird person who likes weird stuff and wants to be able to like all of her weird stuff no matter what. And so there's like a common bond there that she is like, this is how I get to be my weird self. Meanwhile, like her friend is like growing up and getting a job and getting an apartment and everything. So it feels like it's a way for her to kind of keep in that Arrested Development type place.
She finds what she finds in Seymour is I mean, in a way, she finds a little bit of a sugar daddy, because he does like pay for things, you know. She gets to like be entertained by his weird old things that he has spent a lot of time and money collecting.
Yeah.
You know, that he has to work a corporate job at a company that he like clearly has a beef, you know, a little bit of a bone to pick with. He's like, he doesn't think it's a good company, but he's like, it's a safe job.
Yeah.
It's but she gets to stay immature. She doesn't have to make the sacrifices or hide who she is. I mean, this is all happening in a short time span after graduating high school. She still lives with her dad, who loves her and puts up with her acting like a complete turd to him all the time.
Yeah. Bob Balaban.
Yeah.
Like he's in a million things too.
Yeah.
And then he's like kind of getting back together with an ex that like she hated.
Maxine, played by
Terry Garr, I think.
Terry Garr, uncredited weirdly. Terry Garr from Young Frankenstein, most notably, I guess. But
and she hates her, but like you're not really given a real reason. Like Enid is in the wrong almost in every scenario.
Yeah.
even to the and the movie does a good job of being like, yeah, she's the one in the wrong. Like she's basically, you know, yeah. So she takes it upon a mission upon herself to like try and get him a date, basically, or like find somebody for Seymour. And he's just kind of like he pushes her towards like these random women, and he's like, I don't know, not really my type, you know, I don't really like the kind of things they're into. My favorite is when they go to this bar because there's like an old blues, ragtime actually. To be
fits within the ragtime idiom, but not like the Scott Joplin, you know, piano that you're used to. But
they go to see this, you know, old black musician playing like ragtime in like a sports bar, and like he's like he takes the record with him because he wants to get it signed because like there's only like 2 of these left in the world, you know, like that kind of thing. Everyone's loud as hell and not paying attention, and then he like she gets a woman at the bar to come to him and like talk and sit with him for a little bit, and then like the next band plays and they're called Blues Hammer, and it's like these all white guys and they're like 20s and they're like singing like an old blues song about picking cotton. It's just like so tone deaf and very much the exact opposite of the kind of thing that he would actually like. And the woman like is like dancing and like knocks over a drink, and then he just like gets all huffy and like leaves. So.
Yeah.
And And so
Yeah.
like he wants to be himself to a degree, because he does wind up, the woman that he originally like had the missed connection with winds up calling him, and he thinks it's a prank because they got pranked once before. And then Enid's like, no, you should call her back and actually, see this through. And she's like very nice. She's a businesswoman. She does realty. She's not really into the weird stuff he's into, but she kind of appreciates him, that he likes them. Like, she's not saying don't like your stuff, let's change you. Like she gives him like blue jeans, which apparently that was like very weird for him to be wearing blue jeans. He doesn't like blue jeans, I guess. That I feel like that commentary is like such a 1980s, 90s, like wearing blue jeans. Like it's like,
yeah,
everyone wears jeans. What are you talking about?
They really don't show enough of that relationship to really get a good sense of the dynamic and how he fits within it. But I mean, they definitely show a lot of like he tries to overlook the ways that she kind of doesn't get, or even occasionally talks down on his interests. Like there's like a scene where they're talking about Laurel and Hardy.
Yeah.
He's like, I don't like how the fat one's mean to the skinny one. They're like, she's missing the entire Laurel and Hardy dynamic.
It's like, it's clearly like not bad enough that it like makes him want to break it off.
It's not bad, but it's not good either. It's a very neutral. It's very much him just like, all right, I gotta try. Like, I just gotta try.
Yeah.
We don't have anything in common, but I gotta try. And she's kind of doing the same thing.
Yeah.
She's like, I don't really get this stuff, but like, like it's fine. Like, I'll try. And it probably realistically wouldn't have lasted very long.
No.
Because they do seem pretty different.
Yeah.
Too different. And it definitely seems like he's more willing to compromise. Like, I mean, he talks about, there's the breakup scene, where he talks about like, I've stayed in bad relationships for way longer because I didn't think I could find anyone else. So,
yeah, there are points in the movie too where it's just like very obvious Enid's getting like, she's trying to help set him up with these women, but then clearly is like jealous too. Like, because there's the scene in the bar where she like looks at her reflection in the mirror and then like changes her glasses and takes that weird like net thing out of her hair, and then like gets jealous of like Seymour hanging out with Dana all the time,
which is one of those things. She pushes him to date her, and then she gets mad that he's like, it's weird that I'm hanging out with an 18-year-old girl.
Yeah.
It's like, how that looks. You really have to know how that looks. Like, you can't be that oblivious. But that's one of her big flaws. She really is oblivious. Like, she's
not taking him into regard. Like, she's not taking into the fact that like it looks weird. Like, all the dudes that he hangs out with are just like, oh, that's weird. Like, well, whatever. Like, good for you, dude. Like, they're basically all losers. And my favorite scene, one of the most like left field jokes in the whole movie is where like he rooms with this guy. I can't remember that character's name. He's also been in a million things too. But like, he's like trying to get a hold of Enid, and like he's like can't get in the mind of a woman, and then the most cartoonish fart sound happens. It's like a Ren and Stimpy fart sound happens.
Yeah. I think that was that Tom McGowan?
I don't know.
Yeah. Heavyweights, Sleepless in Seattle. I think what else he's been in. Lots of character actor roles. Oh, Frasier. He was on like 42 episodes.
Oh, yeah. He's like, he works in the studio, right?
Yeah. Kenny Daly.
Yeah. So like the guys are kind of like jealous a little bit, I guess. Especially David Cross's character is trying to like hits on Scarlett Johansson. But then in that scene, Enid does the shitty thing and like leaves her with David Cross, who clearly she is not interested in. She's just like, all right, I'll see you later. Like, Enid is not a good friend. She's a bad friend.
She's self-absorbed in her little interests.
And before, when
really
he was just,
doesn't even go that deep on any of them.
right. But before, whenever like it was just Seymour and his friends and other record guys, like he kind of went along with it. But then like once he's with Dana, he's like, okay, you clearly we can't be seen hanging out together, especially by my girlfriend. You know, like you're too young. It looks weird. You know, like even though I would say that like his, like I said, he manages to avoid being a creep in a situation where he looks like a creep. Like he should be the creep look in that situation, but like he never makes a move on her. He never like says anything. He never like you kind of get the like you could tell he likes the attention he's getting from her.
Yeah,
but he has no misconceptions about like anything more than being a friend.
Yeah,
in his mind. Well,
yeah, he really doesn't. He's like, yeah, you're an attractive young girl, like obviously. Like he just recognizes that as like an objective, you know, he can't, you know, but he doesn't pursue attractive women his own age. Like like they have multiple instances where she like points out someone and he's like, hey, a woman like that. No. And she's like, I didn't ask you if you think that they're attracted to you. Like I was asking if you think they're attractive, which is like one of the more insightful things that Enid says. But yeah, he's so used to not even, he completely has no self-confidence. Like he doesn't even entertain the idea that she would be interested in him. So he doesn't really even entertain making a move on her. Like it's so outside of the realm of possibility to him that it's like he doesn't act creepy towards her in any way. He really only tolerates her being around, and he's clearly uncomfortable with her being around him all the time because she like pushes all kinds of boundaries. But he's just like, it's just different enough attention that he's like, all right, I'll see where this goes. This is different than the conversations I have with all the other 78 collectors that I hang out with that I clearly don't like. I like when they she's like, list off your interests, and he's like, what are your 5 top interests or whatever? And he's like, well, old jazz, blues. He's just like naming off genres of music. He's like, well, let's just say music. Like we need to find someone has similar interests to you. And he's like, I don't want to meet people that have the same interests as me. I don't like I hate my interests.
He's a really interesting character, and it's like one of the more subdued Steve Buscemi roles too. Like he feels very reactionary the whole time. Like he's just like, he's mainly just reacting to Enid the whole time. Like that's kind of how it feels. And then his moments to like really let out his personality inside of things is like the anger, like the road rage moments, like him getting cut off in traffic, and then like them sitting and waiting for like the family to cross the street.
Yeah.
And he's like yelling at him, why don't you have a couple more kids? It's very, very Harvey Pekar scene. The joke about the crack in the laminate, I was just like, so I feel like there's a pretty high chance that the directors and the writers of that American Splendor movie have seen Ghost World, and that was kind of a reference, with the Terry Zwigoff connection to Crumb. They made Crumb say that, didn't they? Oh no, they made Harvey say there's a crack in the laminate, but
there's a crack in the laminate.
Crumb's like, hey, this Jay McShann record's pretty rare, and so I feel like the directors of that movie were like probably fans of Ghost World too. I don't think it's
actually a reference. I think it's probably something that is said often by people who collect 78s. They're like, it's got a cracked laminate. 78s are an insane thing to collect, which no one collects them anymore. They're fucking awful to play. They're insanely fragile. You can't ship them. They're worthless. They are truly like only the most super rare things are worth anything, and those things have all been bought and found, which is something that I was thinking, like all of the like looking at Seymour's apartment, I'm like, that apartment rules. Like it is so cool. He has so much just like wild old shit that's just like you can't find stuff like that anymore. Like that stuff's all been bought. It's all been found. This was an era where you could thrift shit from the 30s. That's long gone. Like, which I'm not like even into that era of stuff, pre-war stuff, and I'm not really interested in. But it is just, it's cool to see it so well curated. And his apartment is very nice. It's very homey. Has good taste, and it's not just piles of shit everywhere. Like
Harvey's home.
Yeah, it's well displayed. It's well curated. He takes care of his stuff, which is Seymour's an interesting character. He's not the stereotype of that kind of person that some of the other characters around him are.
I did read that apparently Steve Buscemi was so uncomfortable with this role in this film that like as soon as they were done shooting, he would take all of his wardrobe off and like change into other clothes so that he was not wearing the same thing he was wearing in those scenes. Like I think he's like, give me away, give me away, give me away, give me away. This is really weird. I don't like. He's.
He plays the character as someone who is extremely uncomfortable. That's one of my notes. I have when David Cross shows up. He's one of the only actors in the whole movie who I felt had natural line reads. Like his delivery is so different from everyone else in the movie. Everyone else is so stiff and awkward.
Yeah, it's true. Like it is funny because he comes across as like a different caliber of like, loser. Which is weird because it's like Steve Buscemi's in there, like, and Steve Buscemi's a great actor, but I guess the role he's playing is very subdued.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, David Cross is the one who comes across as just like, look at this star on the screen. Yeah. And this is like 90s, or 2001, David Cross. Like he had just done Mr. Show and like been in random movies as like small bit parts, like Men in Black,
Speaking of other like, they're in this.
There's a ton of those in here.
Patrick Fischler.
Who's that?
He's the guy who talks like this. Yeah, the comedian from Mad Men.
Oh yeah. The Chip guy.
Barrett. Yeah.
Yeah, when we saw him, I was just like, hey, there he is. Like
anything he shows up in, you're just like, where the fuck did they find this guy? Because that's how he talks in everything.
Yeah. Brad Renfro, the late Brad Renfro, he is like the voice of reason in their like group of friends. He plays Josh, and like he's the one they like make drive around.
Mm-hmm. And
he's like so sick of their shit. Like how they always come to his store when he's working and just like, oh, here they are. I got 5 minutes left on my shift. There's this Doug character, Dave Sheridan, in the convenience store, where when I saw him, I was like, is that Mike Judge? And I was like,
oh, yeah.
He's like doing a straight up Mike Judge type character.
Yeah.
He's got a mullet. He's like sunburnt to shit. He's got sunglasses and like a big old mustache. And that guy played Officer Doofy in Scary Movie. If you ever saw Scary Movie. But he apparently was introduced to Terry Zwigoff by Mike Judge.
Yeah.
Mike Judge introduced him. And I'm just like, oh, okay. I could see why this guy was on Mike Judge's radar. He never did anything Mike Judge related, but
this guy just has like a cadre of other Mike Judges he just hangs out with all the time.
And he apparently was like an intern at SNL. And like then he worked on like SCTV in the 90s. So like this guy was like trying to make it for years, and he really hasn't really had much luck as far as big roles and stuff. But
there's Weird Al, the waiter.
Yeah.
He's kind of like a character. He's in The Artist, he's in Fight Club. He's in The Hills Have Eyes.
Yeah.
Remake from 2006.
The guy who was like interested in Scarlett Johansson at the beginning of the movie with like the curly hair, that's the dude, the Screech looking guy from Bones. Remember that guy? The one with the beard and the curly hair in Bones, who was like dating way above his leagues. TJ Tyne.
Mm-hmm.
Because when he walked in, I was like, holy shit, there's that guy.
Somebody else.
There's the alien autopsy guy. He looked familiar, but I don't think he's actually really been anything that I knew.
Oh, there's the woman in line in the coffee shop, Debbie Derryberry, who I think naturally she has a Yardley Smith voice.
Oh,
because like she's shown from far away, and like she has like maybe one line. I'm like, is that Yardley Smith? It wasn't, but it's another voice actor. She's one of those voice actors who like She definitely does lots of babies, lots of little kids, lots of little creatures. She's one of those voice actors that has like, shit ton of video games and cartoons credits, like 400 something credits or something like that. But they're nothing substantial. It's like she's one of those voice actors that gets constant work but never has like a major role.
Yeah.
She does the voice of the little green aliens in the Toy Story movies.
Yeah, that's probably like her most famous
Most
thing.
notable thing.
Yeah, it's a very like very rich extras and back, supporting, not even supporting cast, like small roles, bit parts in the movie.
Seymour's psychiatrist at the end of the movie, Diane Salinger, is what's her name from Pee-wee's Big Adventure? Simone.
Oh.
She also plays the Penguin's mother in Batman Returns.
I guess it's worth noting the climax of the film too. Like, Enid has basically made a mess of her entire life, like all her relationships. Like, she's unhappy that Maxine is moving back in with her dad and not moving in with Rebecca. She wound up being forced to fail the art class.
Yeah.
It's basically like nothing is going right. And then she like goes to Seymour's apartment one night and like she like drinks like the whole bottle of champagne that like Dana was saving for their 2-month anniversary, and another boundary that she just like fully steps over.
Yeah. They both drink the champagne.
He's drunk too. Yeah. Or enough, And then they get romantically involved for one scene, and she like tells him that she wants to move in with him, and like basically she just wants to live her little weird life with him because it means that she gets to stay weird.
Yeah.
And Dana, that's when the next day he like goes and breaks up with Dana at her work, and then like he's trying to call her, and like she's avoiding his calls, and they go into voicemail a million times. I did laugh whenever he's calling her and leaving her a voicemail, and it cuts to him, and he has one of those old timey phones.
Yeah.
Those ones that are like on like a stand with like the little thing that you hook on it, like I don't even know how you describe the ones you used to see in old.
You hold the little cup to your ear.
Yeah.
And
it's on a string.
To the stand.
Yeah. I was amazed that phone even worked. And then like she like avoids him, and then like says she's gonna,
like, oh shit, I fucked up.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. And that's when he finally is basically when he snaps too. Like she's avoiding him. She says, she goes back to Rebecca and says she is going to move in with her, and disappears altogether. Yeah. Like they can't find her. And so he goes to the convenience store because he thinks he goes to Rebecca's apartment, and then she like shows her a little doodle book and like tells him about they set him up that first time at the diner. And so then there's like a picture of Josh in there too. And so he kind of flips out, and he goes to the convenience store that Josh is working, and he tries to like knock over the shelf, but it doesn't budge at all. Then he gets choked out by nunchucks by Doug, and then winds up in the hospital. Did she say where she was when she finally shows up at the hospital?
I don't remember. They really don't show where she goes. Because did she go to work at the computer store?
Right. She might be wearing the computer store shirt.
Wearing the computer store shirt at one point, but.
Yeah. Well, did she go quit the computer store? Is that what she did?
She said she was going to quit the computer store. Yeah, it's not clear where she goes, because she was supposed to go to the new apartment at like noon. And she doesn't ever show up, and Seymour shows up there at like 3. So they don't really explain that. It's not clear where she goes.
Which I guess it doesn't really matter, because it's supposed to be like another thing that shows like she just does not consider other people.
She just comes and goes as she pleases. And but she comes to see him in the hospital or whatever. And she shows him the rest of the sketchbook. She shows him all these like great drawings of him. She's like basically like kind of makes amends. And she's like, I really did appreciate you for who you were, which is like, that's the redemption for her as a character, is that she's like, as much as she like entertains herself with all of these little interests and using other people as in little interests and hobbies, like she does realize that she took that too far. But it's pretty subdued.
Yeah.
Like, it's not a really profound realization. And trying to think of the timeline. She leaves there, and then she's like walking, and she sees the old man who's been sitting on the bus bench, waiting for a bus route that was canceled like 2 years ago. And he gets on the ghost bus, basically.
And then at the end of the movie, she goes and gets on the ghost bus.
Yeah.
And because she mentions earlier in the movie that her biggest fantasy is just going off in the middle of nowhere away from everyone else, like just leaving everyone and everything behind. And that's what she does. That's the idea at the end of the movie. My problem with it, the end, that's honestly my least favorite part of the movie is the end, because I'm like, that's it. She just gets on the bus and leaves. Like, that's what she wanted to do. Yes.
So there's different interpretations on the ending of the movie. When I saw her get on, when the old man gets on the bus, I'm like, oh, he died. And then she gets on the bus, like, oh, she killed herself.
Well, because that also kind of like goes off in the middle of nowhere by herself, away from everyone. It's kind of like, is that suicidal ideation? Is that what you're talking about?
That's a pretty big red flag. It's like people who disappear with no plan usually just don't want to live anymore.
And that was like, when I watched that, I was like, is this supposed to be a metaphor for her committing suicide? And apparently, like, Zwigoff is like, no, it was not at all.
Klaus even says,
yeah. They were like, that's not what we meant by that. We meant that as a positive, like she's going off and actually kind of living on, becoming her own thing. But really, based on the entire movie, she hasn't shown us that she can even do that. Like, going off and doing her own thing by herself. Like, she doesn't seem like someone who could do that at that point in her life. So it does. It definitely leans closer to that. And like, apparently, like, they were like, but enough people have come up and said that to us that maybe there's something there. Because there's always the artist intent versus like audience interpretation, and neither is necessarily right or wrong. It's all interpretation. Thora Birch, though, who plays the character, says she thinks it's a sad, very dark ending. Yeah. And so Thora Birch clearly is like, no, she's going to kill herself. That's what's happening.
There's another interpretation that it's purgatory, that she's already dead, that she's living in a ghost world, thus the name of the which is, like a fairly literal interpretation of the name, and I could definitely see how that wasn't intended. But it's definitely like, well, you didn't do a very good job of communicating what you intended if so many people come to the interpretation that she either kills herself at the end or that she's already dead and she's moving on to the afterlife. After she's like realized, made her realization at the end of it could be that and still be intended as a metaphor for a coming of age, that childhood and adolescence is a form of purgatory, or the transformation from adolescence to adulthood is a form of death. And when you make that transformation willfully, it is like killing yourself. And I think that it can be a little bit of both, but it's definitely not a happy ending. I don't get where they got the idea that it was a happy ending. And I don't know how they could have shot that scene where a man with like Alzheimer's or dementia of some sort, who's been waiting for a bus that never comes, gets on a bus and then disappears. And then a teenage girl who is like adrift and disconnected from all of her relationships and has like kind of destroyed the mental health of a 40-something-year-old man. Like, gets on the same bus that the old man gets on. Like, it was so, like, when she got on the bus, I'm like, it was immediate. Like, I said it out loud. She kills herself. It was just like, oh, it was so obvious that I'm like, how did you guys not think that's what it was about? How were you surprised when people said that to you? Like, the first time you should have been like, oh yeah, I see that.
Yeah, I found this note on IMDb's like did you know section, and it says the film was not easy sell for mainstream audiences, which got studios thinking of the strangest ways to make it more accessible. According to Terry Zwigoff, one executive suggested we have a bus at the end with the destination art school spelled out on it. which to me goes, the producer or the executives are like, we got to make her go somewhere. Like, it's kind of like their interpretation. But then another one says, another suggested a double wedding where Enid marries Seymour and Rebecca marries Josh. And that would be like, that's like a cartoon like ending, like a Three Stooges type ending to a movie there. Art School would be like, Art School is the out that they probably should have gone with. Like, because she is given that like free year to art school, but she has to like fill it out. But then it gets, because she fails the class and she can't go now. But like, I feel like that should have been what it is. Like, that's where she can go to kind of figure herself out a little bit more, still get to be artistic and weird. But I guess we've also been faced with the art school, the art teacher who has a narrow view of what art's supposed to be. So then now we're
You're right. She wouldn't fit in an art school, really, or she would become the kind of like person that sees art in a way that she doesn't agree with. Really, you don't even really get the impression that she cares that much about doing art.
Yeah, because I want to describe her as like the weird art chick, but she's also like not that either. Like, she just happens to draw is really kind of like her thing, and make things. It is artistic expression, but at the same time, like, she doesn't seem to really care or give a shit about it. It's just kind of a thing she does.
So one of the things about the comics and the movie by extension that I think is kind of interesting in terms of like how the movie makes a lot of the commentaries that it does make. Daniel Clowes specifically chose to make the protagonists of the story teenage girls so that people wouldn't read his more pointed criticisms as like the characters speaking for him as the author, which he really was. Like, he chose them to be like, Enid is her name is Enid Coleslaw, which is an anagram for Daniel Clowes. Her character really is, I think she's described as an id monster. That she's representative of the author's subconscious, I guess. He specifically was writing the story from his own perspective, but chose to change the character to something that people wouldn't interpret as being him, which is pretty smart if you're gonna do that. So he feels his artistic philosophy feels pretty aligned with like your R. Crumbs, with your underground comics attitudes of just being just countercultural a lot of times for the sake of it, and very dismissive of really not that interested in symbolism. So I guess I can see how they like failed to realize the symbolism of the ghost bus. Ultimately just seems very cynical, very nihilistic. I wouldn't say nihilistic, but on that kind of like disaffected existentialism, I guess.
Yeah. So initially, Thora Birch was they wanted her to play Scarlett Johansson's character, and apparently Christina Ricci was going to be the Enid character. And I see
they were really determined on having a big forehead in that role. But have a big forehead.
But apparently, like, the timing wasn't working out, like, you know, for another project she was working on, which I think would be Prozac Nation. That's the movie that came out in 2001, the same year. Yeah. Which she was like in a like producer on that movie too. So maybe that was probably the better move for her creatively. I also think she would have played the character very differently. I don't think it would have come across the same.
No. We could talk about Thora Birch as an actor, child actor.
Yeah. Hocus Pocus is her big role.
Did a lot of stuff as a kid. She was in American Beauty, right?
Yeah, she is. Yeah.
Which, you know, has the underage topless scene. her parents were 70s porn stars. They were in Deep Throat, both of them.
Whoa.
Yeah. Real freaks. Her dad was her manager into her adulthood, and kind of like tanked her career.
Yeah, she kind of disappears.
She disappears. Yeah, because he was real controlling and real weird, and like insisted on being on set in like a sex scene when she was like 25, which would have been a closed set, and like was like real weird about like where the camera should be to make her look good, and real gross. She got fired from a stage production of Dracula, and replaced by her understudy because he was a controlling freak. And like I think he supposedly like threatened one of the other actors because of how he was acting in a scene with her. I don't remember exactly what the story was, which she was like completely caught off guard by being fired from it, because she said like it was getting all these notes about my performance of doing great, like it seemed like it was going really well. I don't know what kind of fallout has happened in her relationship with her dad, but since then, but I know she's done a little more lately. She's on Walking Dead for maybe a season.
Yeah, she was in The Last Black Man in San Francisco, but that's like it's like a very short scene. She was in the Gabby Petito story. Interesting. She had some show called Overleaper, which I don't know. Oh, okay. Podcast series. Yeah, she's Affairs of State was like a bigger movie she was in. Yeah, she's definitely, because she kind of seemed like she was on the verge of a breakthrough. Like Ghost World probably should have been like her breakthrough role, because it was like she's the leading star of that movie.
Yeah. American Beauty and this movie are like, they're the ones where people are like, oh, Thora Birch is gonna break out. She's gonna be somebody. There was definitely hype in her career, and then just tanks in the mid 2000s because of her dad. I'm trying to think of what the other notes I had would be. And then ScarJo, she gets huge.
Yeah, she gets massive, and it's funny. She's like gets huge, and she was like the supporting role. Like, you know, like she's not even in the movie that much.
Yeah, you're led to believe half of what she says in the movie.
God, she's a mumble mouth.
She mumbles so bad.
And then Steve Buscemi continues his long career of just being a character actor.
Yeah, that guy looks weird.
We'll put him in it. What year is Big Lebowski?
That was probably 98.
Oh, so it's a little bit earlier, because he has the same hair in that movie as he does in Big Lebowski. I was seeing what else he
hair in like Reservoir Dogs too, doesn't he?
No,
I think it's pushed back more.
It's a little more greased up. They're all kind of greased up in that movie. I was seeing what else he was doing around this time period. So 2001, very busy year.
Haircut in Fargo.
No, not really. It's longer in this movie, like it is as Donnie. So he's in Double Whammy, Final Fantasy: The Spirits Within as a voice. Okay, I didn't even know he was in that movie. The Gray Zone, Monsters Inc. There's his money that year. Yeah. Randall. Domestic Disturbances. Oh, that's the movie where Vince Vaughn kills him and shoves him in like a furnace. Yeah. Yeah. So those are his movies for that year. I like Domestic Disturbance. That was a pretty good movie. Oh, maybe it wasn't Vince Vaughn. It was the kid's just stepdad or something like that. Yeah. When Danny witnesses his stepfather Rick murder a man, Danny's father Frank has to protect his son from the greatest danger. Frank is John Travolta. Danny is Matt O'Leary. And who's the dad? It is Vince Vaughn. Okay, yeah, it is. Yeah, shove Steve Buscemi into a furnace. I need to watch Boardwalk Empire. That's like his probably like most prominent role. He's like the lead for a very long period of time.
Yeah, 56 episodes. Yeah.
Yeah, and that show has Michael Shannon. That kind of introduced everybody to Michael Shannon too, and the guy who played Combo in This Is England is in that too.
Oh.
So okay, we should probably wrap it up. But
yeah. Well, I have two more notes to talk about. the credits actually gave me 2 more notes to talk about. Weirdly enough, Enid's drawings in the movie are done by Sophie Crumb.
Yeah.
And there's a little at the end. There's a little URL for ghostworld-themovie.com. So I was like, oh, is this a dead site? Is this like an old website that's still a zombie website that's still alive? It's not. If you go to that URL, it takes you to an Indonesian slot machine website. So I was like, which is weird that they bought that, but I guess they realized it was getting just enough traffic. But I put it in the Wayback Machine just to see if you could see it, what it looked like at one point. The website was still active until about 2012. 2013, it turns into kind of just a generic splash page for the Mr. Mudd production company,
which was John Malkovich's production company. This is the first movie they made.
Yeah.
What else did they make?
Probably just mostly weird John Malkovich movies. They did do Art School Confidential, I think. They did
Perks of Being a Wallflower. They did Juno.
Yeah.
Those are all precocious teen movies. All of them.
The last thing they did was Demolition in 2015, which is Jake Gyllenhaal, Naomi Watts. I don't know what that's about.
No. They did young adult. Okay. Did a couple things. The Libertine.
Yeah, you can see the old website on the Wayback Machine. You unfortunately can't do anything with it other than see the main landing page because it was a flash site, so none of the links work. But it is fun to see that old websites, what they used to look like. That's all I got.
Yeah, that's really all I have to do. I'm conflicted on this movie.
Once it really gets into the main story, I think it's good. But I do think it takes a little bit too long to get into the main story, and it spends so much time before it undermining the main character's like whole morality. You really don't root for her, and she really doesn't have such a substantial change, which is why I think it's so easy to interpret her as just dying at the end of the movie.
Yeah, she gave you nothing to show like what her next step was going to be. Like it was literally just, and I get it. I guess the idea is like, you don't know what you're going to do with your life. Not everyone does. Not everyone figures it out. So you're just kind of lost in a drift. But I don't know. It was just vague enough that I was like, I feel like it needed just a touch more, just something a little bit more defined. Because otherwise it's just, and she left everyone she ever knew behind. So it's hard not to go dark with that.
Yeah. Which, like, yeah, I don't know. That's to see that as like such a like, oh, this is a happy, positive twist. Like that to me says that you're like, you want her to keep being the kind of person that she is, because she really doesn't make that much. I don't know. She really doesn't make that big of a change. She leaves behind all of these people that have put so much work into being her friend.
Yeah.
And really put up with a lot of.
What is her arc? Like, I guess that's what it is. Like, she doesn't have much of an arc.
Yeah.
She just gets shitty, jealous. I realized I fucked everything up. ? Like, it's not much of an arc. Like,
yeah. It's one of those, I don't know. It's a story. It's just such a main, like, as a main character, she's so passive until she finds her purpose, and her purpose is mostly just like fucking with someone. Which this is one of those movies that is kind of it's not a big one of this category of movies, but it's one of those movies that people kind of make their personality.
Yeah. Okay, so that reminds me. I saw a tweet this week after we'd already decided to do this movie. I saw a tweet this week that it was a screenshot of American Splendor, and the comment was the perfect comic book movie, the perfect comic book adaptation. And then someone retweeted that and said, but actually, and then put a screen grab of Ghost World.
Yeah.
And one, I've never read Ghost World, so I can't say for sure, but the Seymour character is a much smaller part of that book. Like, he's just kind of like someone they encounter. Like, he's not third on the call sheet or second on the call sheet,
Yeah.
And because because Daniel Klaus was like, he co-wrote the movie with Terry Zwigoff, and he said originally he just tried to like reformat the script of the comic to fit a film, but it doesn't work. It doesn't work for a movie. So then he like blew that story up and then started a new one from scratch. And so he said the version at the end is more of a combination of the original graphic novel and the entire new story he tried to tell. So if we're being honest, that's not a great adaptation.
Yeah.
It also helped that American Splendor is like half documentary.
Yeah.
Half biopic, half American Splendor adaptation.
Yeah, I do think American Splendor is better as an adaptation, though, because it does
adapt the stories.
Adapt. Well, it adapts like literal stories from the comics, but it also like it adapts the overall like style of the comic series, which is slice of life.
Yeah,
it's really not narrative. Yeah, I think Ghost World, the comics are, it's definitely more episodic. It's more in that vein of like just little stories and little observations of weirdos in this world, which is not really what the movie is.
I would say women of a certain age love this movie.
Yeah.
Certain age and a certain outsidery kind of persuasion.
Yeah.
Love this movie.
Which is impressive for a movie written and directed by men.
Yeah.
Where like the author like specifically was just writing characters from his own perspective. So yeah, I guess is like at least part of the key to writing believable women characters is just make them act like you.
Wow.
give them the same, feelings, good or bad, that you have.
You mean create 3-dimensional characters with flaws?
Yeah.
Realistic personalities. Yeah. Yeah. Worth watching?
Sure.
We've gone through the entire beat to the entire movie.
Yeah, sure. If you've never seen this, I don't know. If you've never seen the movie and you listen to us describe the whole movie, I don't know. I never listened to podcasts that describe an entire movie. But I'm also like, I don't care about spoilers.
Yeah, they do say that spoilers actually enhance your appreciation of the actual film itself, in the sense that you're now paying attention to the acting more, the direction, the effects. Like you're paying more attention to the craft if you already know the story.
You always appreciate a movie more the second time you watch it. Like I said at the beginning of this episode, like if I watched it again, I'd probably like it more. Yeah.
But I also think that you're only going to see a movie for the first time once. So why not let it be a surprise? Because some of my favorite moments, movie-going experiences, were a movie that I didn't know the ending to, and I went in and I was like, holy shit, that ending. Sorry to bother you. Did you ever watch that?
Yeah.
The end of that movie is bonkers. Split, the way that movie ends, I stood up in the movie theater. I was like, what?
I can't think of very many movies. I really can't think of any movies off the top of my head. There's probably something where I like got to the end and I was like, what? And that was like a really important part of the movie to me.
Split makes sense because it's a Shyamalan movie, and that's kind of like the whole point of like half of his movies is the what ending. It's kind of a cheat code, really, but yeah, the less I know about a movie, the better.
There's definitely movies like there can be twists in movies that I'm like, whoa. Did you see Barbarian?
Yeah.
That one.
That's a good one.
That's mid movie. You're like, what the fuck?
Yeah, that's a good twist.
That's a good one in terms of like where being surprised was beneficial for the movie.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, it's definitely interesting if you're a fan of stuff like not American Splendor. Maybe if you're an American Splendor fan, but more so like High Fidelity, maybe Empire Records. What's another like kind of weirder one? I don't know. I can't think of one off the top of my head, but
I also enjoy this movie on the location spotting. Nothing really recognizable, but it is very clearly like LA. That apartment building especially. I'm like, that is so much of LA.
I mean, I love how it looks. I love the visual elements, the costumes, the cinematography. Just like,
Yeah, it's really well shot movie.
it looks so cool. Just a really cool looking movie. And like the fashion is really fun to look at. And yeah. Yeah, I don't know.
Good enough.
Yeah. We'll have to like one day we should like sit down and be like all the movies we've covered and just kind of like rank them or something. Just
for a movie that I multiple times while watching it said I'm not enjoying this. I ended up liking the movie more than that would lead you to believe. So I think it is worth watching.
Yeah.
I could rank this. This one would probably rank pretty high out of all of the movies that we've watched for this. I mean, it's no Jack Frost, but
but Dad. But it's definitely no Repo Man or
no
Return of the Living Dead.
No, doesn't quite have the charm of those movies.
And I guess we could mention the actual punk song in the movie.
Oh yeah,
the Buzzcock song in the one scene where she pretends to be a punk.
Yeah,
where they're making fun of punk music, and she's going for a 70s punk aesthetic.
Yeah.
So it's kind of a punk movie. There's a discussion about punk in the movie, which is more than most movies.
It counts.
All right, everyone. Well, we will see you next week on the main show where we discuss Sensefield's 2001 album, Tonight and Forever. Forever? I think it's forever. Forever? Forever, ever?
Forever, ever?
But, yeah. That'll wrap it up. Thank you all so much, and we will talk to you later.